We'll call our meeting to order tonight. We have a new person taking roll call tonight, so Kathy is sitting in for Renata. If you could take roll call, please.
Amy Evans.
Here.
Dan Gookin.
Here.
Kiki Miller. Here. Steve Adams.
Here.
Woody McEvers.
Here.
Ron Enninger.
Here.
Okay, we will rise for our invocation. We have Pastor Jeff Reinhardt here tonight to do our invocation.
Good evening, thank you. I'd like to read a prayer from Mr. Ted Loader. Let us pray. Thank you for all we forgot, our gifts, not rights. Forgive us for all the grievances we remember too well. Save us from the self-pity, the self-seeking, the fat-heartedness, which is true poverty. Guide us if we're willing, drive us if we're not, into the hard ways of sacrifice which are just and loving. Make us wide-eyed for beauty and for our neighbor's needs and goodness, wide-willed for peacemaking and for the confronting power with the call to compassion, wide-hearted to love and for the unloved who are the hardest to touch and need it the most. Dull the envy in us which criticizes and complains life into 1,000 ugly bits. Keep us honest and tender enough to heal, tough enough to be healed of our hypocrisies. Match our appetite for privilege with the stomach for commitment. Teach us the great cost of paying attention, that, naked to the dazzle of your back as you pass, we may know we are always on holy ground. Breathe into us the restlessness and courage to make something new, something saving, and something true, that we may understand what it is to rejoice. May wisdom and truth guide this council's business tonight. Amen.
Amen. Steve,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Don't believe that there are any amendments to the agenda tonight. So we will move right into presentations. We have a presentation tonight on the Sherman Avenue Transportation Safety Audit. Chris Stanley. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me. That was fast. Usually we wait a little longer than that.
We're quicker.
Apparently, you guys are on it. I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission for our city of Boise, and last night it went to 2 a.m. So I'll try to be brief because I understand the process that you all have. A cattle problem, great.
We're a lot more efficient up here in the north.
I understand that. Well, Mr. Mayor, Council, thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity. I'll first tell you that this was a great pleasure to be asked to come up and to do this audit and try to figure out and determine how the corridor can be made a little bit safer for all users, what are some economic aspects and improvements that could be made and really be a part of this corridor in a lot of ways. I used to live up here and went to school up here, and so it meant a lot, and so I really do appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. So I'd like to start off with tonight just to go through a bit briefly about, in terms of the pedestrian aspect of things, who and where are folks coming from that use this corridor by feet or by foot? That's pretty much your shed, your walk shed. And the way that's determined is, for the most part, research will indicate that about anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes is the time people are willing to walk. You take that and figure out a distance, and that's what it looks like. So just something to keep in mind moving forward, your customers, if you will, to Sherman Avenue that get there by foot are pretty much in those areas. So as you move forward, this is something to be thinking of when it comes to projects and intersections. When those folks who do arrive at the corridor by foot get there, this is sort of what they're greeted with. This corridor, as we mentioned, is about 1.5 miles long. There's 23 intersections. Those in red are signalized crossings. So you can see the concentration of crossings that are signalized and protected are certainly at the west end, as you know, in the downtown area. As you get to the further to the east, that becomes a little more fragmented and further apart. We still have a couple, but then we have also an additional marked crosswalk, but that's not signalized. So it doesn't offer and afford quite the level of protection as some of the things that we see in downtown. But we have a whole slew of unmarked crosswalks. In the state of Idaho, a pedestrian is entitled to use that crosswalk just as they would any other, and it's incumbent upon the motorist to stop for them as any other intersection. The problem is, how do you enforce that? How does a pedestrian actually go out and take that right of way, which they're entitled to? It's a challenge. So my job was to come into this corridor, take a good hard look at ways to improve that access and that safety from a pedestrian, a bicyclist standpoint, and then even looking at the land uses in terms of ways to optimize things for both users and beyond. Let's move past that. One of the things that I recall about the city of Coeur d'Alene that you all are aware of is this, and that is that the city has a complete street policy on file that you all supported at one point, which simply states that every single road in the city of Coeur d'Alene will be looked at from this lens and determined in terms of ways to improve things for all users at all times. And so when we do that, this project fits right in line with what the charter is in terms of this policy. So it's just a good reminder of us that you guys have done a great thing, in my mind, of passing this policy, and this corridor fits perfectly and dovetails in with that. So what did I see? From a land use perspective, some things that I saw were certainly the downtown area has a lot of wonderful things going on. And I think you all are certainly aware of that. As you get further east, the land uses start to change. They start to become a little more auto-centric. You see parking lots that pop up, which is fine, but in terms of making it safe for people who are walking and biking, that starts to complicate things. You start to see driveways with greater frequency, which introduces conflict. So you start to see those types of things. Auto-centric land uses certainly have their place, but if Sherman Avenue is to be sort of reborn in a way and be more successful, these might be some areas to think about. So I would show you, here's an example. You all know what this grocery store is, and you see the setback. That setback, it can be a bit of a deterrent. It's a longer distance. There's more conflict for people who are choosing to walk and to get there. Through policy, you can change that. And what if it looked something more like that, where you still have a parking lot, you still have auto, uses and so forth. That's the majority of the customer base. Let's not kid ourselves. But maybe you pull it closer to the street, and it becomes more convenient for people who are choosing to walk or bike. So there's a little example. You can do the same thing here, where we have, instead of having to span through a conflict area with driveways, we move it closer to the street, and therefore it's a little more accessible. Those are some of the land use things that can be done, for example, in future developments. In terms of the pedestrian realm, here, for example, is a good example of scale. As you walk on the east or the west end of town, you see and you feel a comfort level with regard to human scale. Those buildings I would call are human scale. They make you feel like it's an appropriate place for you. As you move further, that changes. Our setbacks change. The amount of asphalt changes. So it becomes just a little less desirous of a place to be. That's why you see a successful downtown and maybe not quite as many customers and people as much on the east side of town. From another pedestrian aspect of things, the crossings. And this is something that we talked a lot about at our workshop. Here's one crossing, for example, and this, I believe, is at 21st Street. You see a 3-lane intersection, and you see the on-street parking. The type of paint, the design of that crosswalk, for example, is something I'll get into in a moment, but that can be changed to make it safer. And it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg and another leg. You can also look at some things like different types of rapid flash beacons, and again, I'll get into that in a minute. That area right there, by the way, is a senior citizen complex and a school zone. And so we hope and we want those people who are using that corridor, like just any other crosswalk, to be perfectly safe. But there's some things that can be done to improve safety. Some other areas that I saw towards the middle of 13th Street, lots of activity. But unfortunately, like I said, that is an unmarked crosswalk. In the state of Idaho, that gives you the same protection as a marked crosswalk. So by letter of the law, if a motorist were to come in and violate her space, they should be ticketed. But that's a tough one to enforce, right? So that's why the marked crosswalks typically are safer. Another one of the crossings that we found out there, and I think, is this 11th Street? I can't recall, 11th or 10th. But distances can be a bit of a deterrent. In this case, this woman was pushing her baby in the stroller and having to cross, in that case, a really fast turn radius. So in other words, vehicles are encouraged to make that right-hand turn at a pretty fast speed. So there's a little design element that can be improved in terms of slowing traffic down a little bit to make it a little bit safer. So those are some of the things that I saw out there that were included in the report that hopefully you've had an opportunity to take a look at. The American with Disabilities Act, it's a bit of a moving target. It's a tricky one. I will tell you that this corridor overall is in pretty decent shape. I've seen a lot worse, and so have you. But there are still some issues out there that need to be addressed. So here's an example where you have a tree well at the top of the curb landing. That would absolutely be, in this case, a violation. And when we did our workshop, and some of you, I think, attended, I put you all in a wheelchair so that you would experience that and understand what that feels like. And so you understand the importance of what a curb ramp looks like. Some other places that were a little tricky and things that need to be addressed that I put in the report is the placement of the push button. On the upper left, you see it's not accessible because actually the one is not on a flat landing, or it's not even paved in that instance. In the upper right, it looks good, but actually by letter of the law, it's too far away from the intersection itself. So the problem there is that when you push the button, those with limited mobility have to then put themselves in a position and take that time to get closer to the street. Not super egregious. I'm not trying to paint some really ugly picture at all. It's just these are some of those things that can be improved, that's all. From the bicycle realm, you know this, I'm sure. You've seen this all the time. There were lots of folks riding on the sidewalk, and sometimes that can be quite contentious. It can be contentious to the business owners who own businesses and have patrons coming in and out of their doors or coming in and out of the on-street parking. And it can be unsafe as well for people who are choosing to walk. But these folks are doing that, as you know, because they do not feel safe on Sherman itself. So if we want to resolve that conflict, then we just need to be thinking about how do we change the street. I will point out to you, though, that in some instances we'd say, well, they should take a parallel route. Well, these folks want to be on Sherman Avenue. For one reason or another, whether they're going to take their wallet out and spend money or they're going to meet a friend or whatever it is, they don't want to take a parallel route. That's where they want to be. So going back to that complete streets policy, how do we accommodate them in some fashion in balancing out the rest of the system? So boiling it down to the last bit, recommendations. My recommendation first was we should really be thinking about reducing the speed limit on the eastern end of things, but by doing it through design. I cannot emphasize that enough. You can go out tomorrow and put 25-mile-an-hour speed limits up and down the street, and it's not going to work because there's no psychology that accompanies it. There's no prompts as a driver for you to slow down to the 25 miles an hour that we want you to do. So that's where the design of the corridor comes into play. Interestingly enough, when I did the difference between where that 35 miles an hour is versus 25 miles an hour, how much time would you lose as a motorist going through there? The answer to that, if you took the entire length of the corridor, is 20 seconds. That's assuming you're doing 25 versus 35. So the question then is, by the way, if you get hit as a pedestrian by a vehicle going 35 miles an hour, you have about a 15 to 20% chance of living. If you get hit by a car going 25 miles an hour, your chances are closer to about 50, 60%. I showed you earlier the 35 mile an hour zone is a school zone and senior citizens, some of our most vulnerable users. So if our desire is to be safer, here's one way that we can probably get there. Buffered bike lanes. My experience has been that those work better than regular bicycle lanes. They give you a bit more space. You have space out there. However, there's a trade-off, and it's in the report. And the trade-off would be that either you do away with some of the on-street parking, all of the on-street parking, or the two-way left turn lane. That's the compromise. It's not something I just created. That's just the reality of the situation. So there are various ways that you can accommodate this by doing any one of those types of treatments if you choose to do so. But it can in fact be done. Certainly increasing the number of crossings. That was something that I think hopefully came through pretty clearly in the report. As I mentioned to you, when you get out towards the east, the number of crossings that are protected goes away. It's really left to the motor or the pedestrian to determine when that gap is in 35 miles an hour traffic to then get across that 60, 70 feet of space. And so a vehicle, by the way, can travel a pretty fair distance at 35 miles an hour in even just a few seconds. So just something to think about is increasing those numbers of crossings. Where you do have crossings or where you'll have crossings in the future, my recommendation would be to adopt a different type of crosswalk marking. The parallel line crossing is cheaper, admittedly, but the problems with it is, one, studies indicate that it's less effective, and number two, because it runs parallel with wheel tracks, it fades fast. It goes away. So you'll have to go out there and again and again and again and again reapply those types of crossings in order for them to be seen, as opposed to either the ladder style or the Continental, where it runs parallel with wheel tracks and they don't even get faded away and they're brighter and can be seen. My philosophy personally is if you're going to put a crosswalk out there, make it the best you can. Why not? It's people. They're vulnerable. They don't win if they get hit by a moving vehicle at whatever speed. Retiming the crosswalks, that was something in the report, and to my understanding, you guys have already gone out and done that. Every crosswalk, by the way, is to be maintained at a 3.5 feet per second time. So every time you go out there, remember that number. So when you go out and see, okay, it's a 50-foot section, how much time am I required to have to cross that road? That's a minimum, however, right? That doesn't mean you can't make it more than that. If you think that the traffic out there with people who are walking is greater, or the pace is a little bit slower, you certainly can add time. There's nothing saying that you can't do that. Embracing ITS, intelligent transportation systems. One of the recommendations in a way that you can control traffic is to time them so that they're phased as you go through from east to west or west to east, so that you're actually dictating to the motorist, no, you're going to go 25 miles an hour through here, because if you don't, you're going to get stuck at a red light. But if you want to actually make it through all the lights, and they'll just turn green, 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 in a really nice timed way, that's one way that you can do that. And I think that you can do it on that corridor because the majority of your traffic is running east-west, not necessarily the crossings. So that's something that should probably be looked into and can actually improve safety. The last couple is enforcing city code. We mentioned that again at our workshop, and that's everything from sandwich signs where people put on the sidewalk. That's public space. That probably violates your city code and your sign ordinances. Landscaping. If someone doesn't trim stuff back from the sidewalk, it can be a deterrent for that entire section if it becomes a hazard. So there's all kinds of different things that we identified that can be trimmed improved and cleaned up and improve conditions overall. So that's a brief, I think I got it in about 10 minutes, overview of the corridor. Like I said, overall, I think this corridor has a lot of good things happening. And it doesn't have, it's not one of these corridors that is really tremendously unsafe. But some adjustments, some tweaks, and I think you'll have something that's even better than what you have today. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Questions for Chris? Woody?
Yeah. Great presentation. You did a good job. You've done this before, I think.
A couple times.
I have a question on the timed pedestrian crossings. It seems like when pedestrians are crossing, traffic is stopped, especially any turning, trying to get across a crosswalk. Is that just normal?
Maybe I'm missing your point, your question in there.
I'm thinking, for example, we're on Sherman Avenue going west, and I come to 4th Street. And at 4th Street, I want to turn right and go north.
Okay.
And the crosswalk is on, and people are crossing. And I'm in the front of the line, and they're not going around me. They're waiting for me to make my right turn. Is that just normal? Because traffic doesn't move if you have a lot of pedestrians there.
Right. Well, they shouldn't be going around you if there's no space to do
Right.
that. That's illegal, actually. It's against the law. One of the things, and I hope I addressed your question, but one thing I mentioned in the report, but I didn't mention here, is actually in your downtown area, I think you should do away with the push buttons altogether. It's really unnecessary. It's in stuff. In fact, you're maintaining something that you don't need to. It should be an automatic process where you shouldn't have to expect people, especially from out of town, to go push a button to get across a street where you have a tremendous number of people there all the time. It can just be an automatic part of it. And incidentally, I saw a number of the push buttons that were damaged, and you're, again, at city expense and taxpayers' expense having to go out and repair those. So do away with them, you know. But I don't know if I necessarily got to your question, but, I mean, yeah, that's the law, right? You shouldn't be going around a stopped motorist to make that turn.
I guess the question really comes down to is how much time do people, if it's green, they keep crossing. The little guy's flashing, the hand coming up. Is that the rule too? Don't start when the hand's up.
Right. Okay, so now I think I understand what your point is. So that gets into the pedestrian head that's telling you to go or stop versus the green light, right? The green light is more meant for motorists, whereas the signal head for the pedestrian is more oriented to pedestrian. That was something in the report that I also noted, was that there in some instances, and in fact I think the one right here by the resort, where the crossing for the pedestrian was about 14 seconds, but the green phase for motorists was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 seconds. So in other words, we're giving motorists 3 times more time to cross a street, so they could be, in theory, several hundred feet back before they even have to worry about a red light. But the person who's trying to walk across might be really only getting the minimum federal threshold, you know, for getting that street or getting that crossing, where if you have that expectation where there's a lot of people crossing here, again, you can marry those two things up. You say, no, you're going to get, you know, a lot more time than the minimum. We're going to give you more time, and you're not necessarily, you know, making some tremendous impact on the flow of traffic. If you're going on Sherman Avenue in downtown to try to go fast and get somewhere, you've taken the wrong corridor, right? That's what I mean. In the end result, it's not a highway. It's not a mobility corridor that you have. It's the heart of your town. It's an economic heart. It's your postcard that you probably advertise to everybody saying, "Come here." So it's not meant for fast-moving cars. It's meant for all the other folks and all users. But you still have to address mobility, certainly.
Thanks.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Chris, a question was asked at our last get-together that we had at Moontime. Were you there?
No.
Okay. Mr. Zito, who owns a bunch of property down there, talked about a perception of a lack of public safety at night. How do you address that kind of issue? I mean, you can make it walkable, but until you get rid of a certain element, people aren't going to walk.
Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to deal with. There's a lot of different ways that you can try to get to it. I'm going to say a poor analogy or metaphor, but it's sort of death by 1,000 cuts, right? I mean, you want to improve things, but it's going to have to be lots of ways to do that. Certainly, I would start with, in terms of the built environment, lighting is going to be key. You know, this is downtown, so if you're stargazing, you're probably in the wrong spot. You need it to be lit. You need attention to be had so people can see. The more people that you have on the street and feel safer, so slowly over time, hopefully, you have more eyes on the street. That's a good thing. Most everybody has a cell phone these days, so if you have more eyes on the street, then hopefully there can be more reporting and people feel a little bit safer that way. Some of the design features, there's something called CPTED, which is, I think it's CEP or CPTED, which is one of these acronyms that basically just gets to safety by design. It's our built environment, how we design things for people to be safer. I would encourage the city to really take a good hard look at some of those recommendations to understand what some of those things could be. Tree canopy, making sure that, you know, if there are street trees, that they're maintained, and so you do have, again, good visibility and not people sort of able to duck in and out. Intersections, again, I mean, I talked about the lighting aspect at night, but then you get into the other part, and that's enforcement. And clearly your folks are already out there, I'm sure, doing a good job of enforcement. Can you have some sort of citizen patrol, maybe, that you look at? That's been done in many places, where you have a few people who are volunteers, and they're not law enforcement, but they're just more eyes on the street, and maybe they take regular walks up and down the corridor. So, I mean, I'm not going to give you that perfect answer, but there's a lot of different things that can be done, I think, hopefully, collectively, though, to build up momentum and get people safer.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ron?
Yeah, you mentioned that it should be more crosswalks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, in the picture that you showed up there with the lady crossing Sherman, say from the south end by 12th Street
Right.
across over, say, to the store across the street,
This picture right there.
right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now there's no crosswalk there. Now, just half a block up on Sherman there at 12th Street, there's no crosswalk there either. But then you get up to 11th Street and there's a crosswalk. So and then I know for a fact that down on 10th and 9th Street, there's no crosswalks down there either. And, the kids that live on the south end of Sherman that go up to Sorensen School have to cross there without any crosswalk. So are you basically saying that places like that should have crosswalks?
The answer to that question is, I think that, number one, it's going to be ultimately up to you guys what intersections are marked, but absolutely that the frequency of marked crossings on the east side should increase. Here's the reality. If you don't, this lady here, case in point, let's say the next block up was a wonderful marked crosswalk. You think she's going to walk a block over to take it, though?
Not for booze.
She's just not. And probably neither would any of us. And so the point being is that you can do as much as you can do, with these marked crossings. But in some instances, people are still going to do that. But right now, there's nothing out there on that east end except for a couple of places that affords any real, safety or designated place. For motorists especially, to understand that they better expect people crossing here. But to your question, I think, yes, you guys as a city will have to look hard. I've made my preliminary recommendations in terms of where I think some of those crossings should go, but you may have a different opinion, and that's exactly what this process is about. In fact, this very intersection in my plan, or in the document, I suggested, I think it was 13th or 12th. And the comments I had back was, what did you mean 13th? And I said, no, I meant 12th. But 13th makes sense too, to be honest. But you might want to pick one or the other, or you could go at a mid-block crossing. There can also be done. And I think that there's a case to be made for a couple of those, because that allows you to put something vertical in the middle of the street that gets to that design speed that I was telling you about. If you just put paint out there, you're not going to get a lot of folks slowing down. If you put an island out there where you don't expect a lot of turning and it provides a safe haven for someone crossing the street, that does two things. It provides a safe place for people to cross, but it also acts as something for traffic calming. It makes you as a motorist realize, if I hit that, it's bad news for me, and I'm not going to, so therefore I'll slow down. That's what you want. That's what your police department probably would love to see, because they don't want to have to constantly write tickets all the time or be told they're not enforcing it enough. They need a little help, so there's another way to do that.
Because at that east end of town, say from 12th Street, going further east on Sherman, there are a lot of places out there that you could have a crosswalk.
I'm just going to pull this up, this area. Right. So you're talking about it out in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the plan, I think what I recommended was that, number one, this definitely needs to be addressed, in my opinion. It needs to be made safer sooner than later. Right now, in my opinion, it's I'm not going to call it dangerous per se, but it's certainly not effective, not for what you're trying to do. But also, in addition to 21st Street, I know off the top of my head, I made a recommendation, I think, for 19th, for 16th, and for that 13th, and maybe one other one. So not necessarily every single one of them, but certainly some of your more likely candidates. And so ultimately, though, it's just an increase in frequency. Right now, downtown, every single street is a crosswalk and marked, and it's a great job, and you see people walking like crazy. You know, you get out east, and you know why it starts to change. But it's also a land use piece. Don't kid yourself. It's not just the lack of crosswalks. It's the desirable land uses that also attract people to walk.
Woody?
I have just one more question. Dawned on me that we're kind of into the specifics of things. When you talked about use, now I'm getting the feeling that we're trying to make East Sherman look like West Sherman.
Mm-hmm.
And is that where we're going with this? We want
Right.
everything to be walkable and downtown cozy.
Uh-huh. So
Is
my
that how
charge
you-
was to come and take a look at ways to make things safer, ultimately, for all users, right? And so in part of that, in part of on that line of thinking, you have to look at land use. It's not just a transportation issue. It has to be land use as well. So whether the East End starts to look like downtown or not, that's going to be up for you guys to decide. But that doesn't mean that you can't start to think about how parcels are configured and laid out, you know, in a way that does at least accommodate pedestrians. It may still be its own unique fingerprint and footprint of what it looks like. It might still look very similar to what it looks like today. But you can improve safety and access by moving some things around and just rethinking about, okay, how many driveways is this parcel going to be allowed to have? You know, the more driveways, the more conflicts, for example, where maybe they abut a side street. Okay, that's going to be your primary access. So things like that are ways that address what we're after without necessarily changing the entire look of East Sherman. That's going to be up for you guys to decide moving forward what the land use ultimately looks like. I can't see that downtown is going to continue all the way down Sherman, but who knows? That could be a free market issue where they just start saying, you might see an application tomorrow for a 10-story hotel. Well, here it comes, you know, here comes that change, and you'll have to figure out how that works.
Thanks.
Any other questions? I just had one question on reducing the speed. So up to 15th Street going east, it's 25. At 15th Street, then going towards Coeur d'Alene Lake Drive, it goes to 35.
Right.
You're saying that through various measures, you want to slow that down to 25. Is there an issue once you slow traffic down there? I've seen issues where on the other streets, say on Lakeside or on Front, then people see that as somewhat of a freeway, a chance for them to go further. I even see one road to the south of their Mullen where there's some issues. Do you see where you attempt to slow traffic down that it causes some issues on either side that need to be addressed?
Mm-hmm. And that's a great question, Mayor. So that you're getting actually into something that gets into, so you can go to your metropolitan planning organization and they have their big model that they forecast. They can tell you every detail in 30 years from now. Not really, but kind of, right? But what they will tell you is that when you have a certain level of congestion, people start to move to other facilities. It's called, I'm really getting wonky on you, but it's the volume delay curve, okay? But that's what you're talking about without even realizing. Maybe you do. So in that instance, my answer would be likely no. Because your parallel routes, number one, they probably have, and I haven't seen everyone, but they probably have a lot of four-way stops where they're going to have to start, stop anyway. If you can be consistent at going 25 miles an hour, like I mentioned to you, it's a 20-second difference. And so, in my opinion, that's not enough to convince somebody that taking an alternative route is going to be any better. In addition to that, again, if you're coming in off the freeway on Sherman, you probably want to be on Sherman, right? That's where you want to be. Otherwise, you would have taken a different route to get to where you want to go. You might turn to go to a friend's house or something like that, but for the most part, that's where you want to be. And if that's the case, you're going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very
Well,
much. Ron.
Yeah, I kind of question that a little bit because I remember a couple years ago or so that when they were doing construction work on Northwest Boulevard, people that lived downtown, that would work downtown, that lived at Hayden or Dalton, would come down Northwest Boulevard in that way. But when they did the work on Northwest Boulevard, I found, because I live just off of 15th Street, that we got a lot more traffic on 15th Street going north, because people found out that, instead of coming down Northwest Boulevard or 4th, there was another way to get back home out onto, by going 15th Street. And we got a lot more traffic then on 15th Street, and we still have a lot more than what it was, because, like I say, the Northwest Boulevard, and that was blocked off. So the people that live in Dalton or Hayden found that, hey, we can go 15th Street and go just as fast, if not faster, to get back home. And that's what they did. And they still do it.
So my answer to that would be twofold. One, not having seen what that looked like, what your example, I can't speak to the specific details of what was happening there, but what I can say is twofold. One, a construction zone is a whole different animal. You have temporary stops, goes, you can have different intersections, you could have delays that are longer, because you're moving heavy equipment around or whatever, or you have, maybe a reduction in capacity. You could have 3 lanes down to 2, 2 to 1, and no weaving. We're not talking about that here at all. So you wouldn't have any of that. The other piece I would say to that would be that if you look at where people live, right, majority of people who live in this region live in this long linear core north-south for the most part, right? Who, if you're trying to get into Coeur d'Alene, you're doing a north-south. That's why 95 is so busy. Whereas instead of east-west, especially east of Sherman, you have some people living out there. Of course you do, but nothing like you just rattled off, Dalton, Hayden, all the other cities and populations that live up that way who are trying to get up and down. So the sheer number of people, it doesn't surprise me that people were trying to get around, because that's their primary way to get into downtown Coeur d'Alene. In this instance, I don't see that would necessarily be the issue. It's unique unto itself. But here's the thing. Here's the other part of it. If you go out and if you studied this and you said, let's do that, do it temporarily. Do it for a couple years. Do it for a year, whatever. And if it works, leave it. If it doesn't, undo it. That's the beauty of that. But you can undo some things that you do.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right.
You have something for us, Hillary?
Yes. I'm just going to do a quick follow-up and status report on some of the items that Chris Stanley spoke
Great.
of. And I will keep it brief. All right, so the walking audit I felt was a great success, and we had 21 participants, and we looked at the corridor from 7th down to, I think, 17th, and then Chris provided a lot of context for us, as well as kind of the recommendations you heard this evening. So after the audit and after we received the recommendations from Chris, we met internally with the different departments and determined what were some easy wins that we could start taking action on right away. And so these things have already actually happened. We did go out, Gordon Dobler went out and adjusted the pedestrian crossing times, starting from 7th Street going east. And so those are now, should meet the federal requirements and are more appropriately timed, which is good. And I personally have tested them out, and they are better than they were before. So that's great. The crosswalks were restriped at 6th and 21st. So now they have that high visibility paint. And I'll show you a picture of that on the next slide. Stop sign at 18th was moved. That was within the sidewalk area, which was necessary for the mobility for ADA. And then there was some signage that was hanging too low, and that has actually been resolved. That was between 21st and 22nd Streets. So Tim Martin and his crew removed those. There was a tree that was at 11th, so the northeast corner was blocking part of the signal. So that was a safety concern. That was trimmed back. And then there was a wood truck that was parked on Sherman close to the crosswalk at 21st, and that was creating kind of a safety issue because it was blocking visibility of the crosswalk, which is important for getting kids across to Fernan. So that code enforcement took action on that, and the wood truck has been removed. So pleased to report that we've already made some great progress. Here are some photos of the after. So the top photo is that high visibility painting. So before it was just the two lines parallel, and now it has that ladder style. So that's a lot better. And then the tree was trimmed back, so now you can see all of the signals at 11th. So some other actions that we think are quite important are, Chris made the recommendation for the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, and that's the acronym up there, RRFB, as well as the high visibility crosswalks at several locations along Sherman. And so this is something that we think would be really important. We are doing some traffic analysis right now. There's going to be traffic counts happening, I believe, this week. And then we're also going to be reviewing some traffic videos that were done for us pro bono by Stephen Peterson. And so we're going to be looking at that just to figure out, of the intersections that Chris Danley recommended, which ones would be the most important for adding some high visibility paint as well as the rectangular rapid flashing beacons for safety. And the ones we are currently thinking are probably the top priority would be 9th because of the kids that do go to Sorensen, 13th, so either 12th or 13th, and then 16th or 17th, we're leaning towards 17th Street at this time, and then 21st Street to improve the existing crosswalk. And then also the lower speed limit, that would be something we could also evaluate with the traffic counts to find out what speed are the vehicles going currently. It's possible that people are already driving 25 and yet it's marked 35, so that'll be something we can determine. And then, of course, as Chris Danley mentioned, it is important ultimately to work with the design to narrow that so that the drivers of the cars know that they should be slowing down. But it really is not a significant amount of the corridor that has a 35 mile per hour. And I did talk to businesses along that section, some of our stakeholders, and they would like it slower because that helps them. And then it makes your business more visible. And, of course, it's safer for pedestrians and bikes. So that's all I have. So I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
I just had a couple questions. Chris had mentioned to do away with push buttons. Is that I would imagine that might be a little bit of a...
That's something I think as funding is available, it's one of those things that would be ideal, but, if they're working appropriately now, is that something we really want to spend money on? But that's something I consulted with Gordon, and he indicated. Yeah, so we can discuss that further.
Okay. And then I would imagine it's not an easy win, but as we get down planning, I agree that lighting is going to be a key in that area.
Definitely.
To have better lighting there.
Yep, that'll help
Other
with safety.
questions for Hillary?
Hillary, I have a question in regards to the ladder paint.
Yes.
Is it twice as much paint? 3 times as much paint as
yeah.
the old
Tim's still
style?
here. Chris might know that answer. I'm not
Budget-wise,
sure that
is
it's
it
twice
gonna-
as much, but it may be. I
So no
think
paint-
as they
there's no
always say,
paint
paint
body.
is pretty inexpensive fix, so.
No, I get
think-
it.
But yeah, it may be twice
So,
as much.
In terms of volume, it depends on the width and length of the crossing, of course. Yes, it's going to cost a little bit more money. There's more paint. There's more time. The other approach that you can take is you can try using thermoplast, which is generally it will last a little bit longer than paint. That will cost more upfront, but hopefully should last longer. The city of Bozeman, one thing that they did that was innovative is they actually went out, cut a little bit of the asphalt out so it's down, and poured the thermoplast in as opposed to it being elevated. Why would you do that? Plow trucks. You guys run a plow truck through here in the wintertime. I don't know about last winter, everybody was dry, but you get the point. That can kind of scrape some stuff off. In Bozeman, they put it below that blade, and it helps with the longevity of the investment.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Great work, Hillary.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to the consent calendar.
Mr. Mayor, I move for approval of the consent calendar, which includes approval of beer and wine license transfer from Get and Go to CTB LLC Get and Go Convenience Store on Niter. Resolution number 15-046, approving amendments to Kootenai County Multi-Jurisdictional All-Hazard Mitigation Plan. Approving S-3-12 Coeur d'Alene Place 25th Edition Final Plat Subdivision Agreement and Bond Security Approval. Approving Street Tree Easement Agreement with Tombstone Investments. And approving a Street Tree Easement Agreement with Idaho Central Credit Union.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call, please.
Yes. McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Aye.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Motion carried. Now is the time for public comment. If there's anyone wishing to come forward, would have 3 minutes if you would like to comment on any city government business. Anyone wishing to come up at this time for public comment? Okay, we don't see any. We will move on to announcements. Any member of the council have an announcement here? Kiki, did you have something?
I did.
Okay.
I have a couple of quick things. One is there's a woman named Barb Nelson, and she's kind of taken on a one-person crusade to get the last handful of World War II veterans that are in North Idaho that she's aware of to go on their honor flight to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials that were constructed on their behalf. So if you know of anyone, I'm going to leave this information with our city administrator, and they have a fundraiser and some information that you can give the names of anyone you might know who's a World War II veteran. They'd like to get those folks at about $1,000 apiece to see those memorials while they're able to fly, and I appreciate all that hard work she's done. And the other thing is I'd like to make a happy and personal announcement that my son got the lead role in the Lake City High School musical Grease, so he'll be singing and dancing as Danny Zuko at the first weekend of November, and I'm very proud of him.
Did he have to cut his hair?
He is still in negotiations on cutting his hair, and I'm shopping for wigs.
So now, is that John Travolta?
It is, that part.
Oh, cool. All right. Any other announcements? Steve?
Well, Mr. Mayor, Kiki reminded me there actually is another auction coming up, the Good Samaritan Rehab, ran by Tim Remington with the altar, is coming up Thursday, October 1st at 6:30 at the Coeur d'Alene Inn. So I know you've been a supporter of that and others on the council as well. So if you're able to make it, I think there's still some seats available.
Great. Thank you very much. Dan?
Mr. Mayor, point of personal privilege, I'd like to acknowledge my friends Dave and Janice, who've come here all the way from California. I've been writing computer books for almost 30 years. Dave gave me my first job at a computer publishing house a long time ago, and Janice ran the Mergenthaler. The Mergenthaler, which is one of my favorite words. I would also like to point out, going on with our East Sherman thing, we had a big presentation about that, and thank you to Chris and to Hillary. We have a block party coming up this weekend, the Parking It on Sherman, and I could read this to you, or you could watch the video that I made with Jeff Crow, who's going to show it up on the big screen and for our viewers at home.
Hello, I'm Coeur d'Alene City Councilman Dan Gookin, and I'd like to extend to you a special invitation. The city, in cooperation with Vision 2030 and the Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors, is holding a block party on Friday, September 18th and Saturday, September 19th. Right here, the 1600 block of Sherman Avenue will be transformed into a Maker's District. This free block party celebration is dog and family friendly. It'll be complete with live music, food trucks, a beer garden, lawn games, the Sorensen Elementary School jugglers, and other entertainment. The purpose is to peek forward at East Sherman and consider the potential for transforming this area into a walkable, bikeable neighborhood destination for people of all ages. You'll find a preview of what East Sherman could look like with bike lanes, cafe seating, trees, plants, pop-up businesses, and lighting. This event coincides with Parking Day, which is a one-day global event in which participants transform metered parking spaces into places for people to congregate. The road will temporarily be narrowed to demonstrate how it could accommodate on-street bike lanes, narrower travel lanes, and landscaping. Other temporary changes include full building facades, decorations, and vendors to illustrate the type of businesses that might be located in a Maker's District. These items were all top responses from the 2015 East Sherman Survey, which is a component of Vision 2030 and the effort to revitalize the east end of Sherman Avenue. Volunteers are needed to help set up, clean up, and provide entertainment for the event. Please contact the Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors at 208-667-0664 or email Julie at cdarealtors.com if you'd like to volunteer. So please, join me right here Friday, September 18th from 4 to 7 and on Saturday, September 19th from 11 to 9 p.m. at the Parking It on Sherman event, 1600 Sherman Avenue between the Dealer Alternative and Moontime. I'll see you right here.
I like that guy. A couple of questions about this have come up, and one of the most, and thank you, Jeff, you did a great job on that, and thank you, the Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors, who are putting up money for it. And one of the questions I got from the public was, who's paying for this? You know, I always want to know who's paying for it. In this case, you heard that. The Coeur d'Alene Association of Realtors have put up some money for it, which is awesome. And they also helped out with the Person Field playground. They donated that too, so they're coming up for this. I think it's great. I hope that one of the faux building facades is Trader Joe's. Everyone talks about that, so come down this weekend and make it happen. Thank you.
Did you do that just in one take? Or how many takes?
We started actually across the street, and there was a gentleman who was having a respiratory problem. So we decided to move across and finish.
And you completed it in just
And we
in one
completed,
take?
and I don't know if that was one take or not, because I could not. I couldn't say on street. I kept saying on screen, which comes from my training, but anyway.
So you did mess it up a few times.
I did, oh, of course. Well, the blooper reel will be on Coeur d'Alene TV at random moments, so.
All right, thank you. All right, anyone else have anything tonight? Okay, move on to other business. We have resolution number 15-047. Sid would like to get $20 million, and Troy's going to tell us how he's going to get it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Your last meeting of the fiscal year, we bring forward to you an opportunity tonight that has been competitively sought after by the city amongst other cities in the state of Idaho, and we were on the top of the list. The Idaho Department of Environmental Quality believes that you can pay back a $20 million loan to fund the treatment phase 2 project at the wastewater treatment plant. This is a fixed rate of interest of 2.75%. It's an amortization of 20 years. There are no loan fees on this particular offer. This is in the rate study that we've done where the rates will pay back this loan. This is a huge honor to get this opportunity. The reason that we can do this is because the city received authority to incur debt for this project on April 2nd, 2013 through the judicial confirmation process. I would entertain any questions you might have.
Questions for Troy?
Well,
Dan.
also I'll ask one, 'cause I know the answer to this one, but not everyone might. So this is paid through the rates. So this is going to be paid back because our sewer fees have slowly been increasing to accommodate paying back this loan.
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for passage of Resolution 15-047, approval of DEQ loan offer, acceptance and agreement in the amount of $20 million for wastewater treatment facility design construction project WW1601. This is really cool.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Aye.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move now to resolution number 15-048, approval of a professional service agreement with HDR Engineering for the tertiary treatment phase 2 improvements. Jim Rimmets from the wastewater. And Sid, talk to us about it.
Sid. Mayor and Honorable Council, we're here to bring forward this professional services agreement with HDR Engineering to begin the design of this phase 2 that will be funded by the DEQ loan. Phase 2 is a tertiary treatment process that is following phase 1, which was completed last December. We're currently diverting about 1 million gallons a day of flow through phase 1, and we're getting tremendous phosphorus removal as well as ammonia removal. So it's been very successful. We're proposing to design phase 2 and possibly start construction next summer on phase 2. As I say, this contract will be funded by the loan. And I think you have a copy of the agreement, the proposed agreement.
Just a couple of points here for your edification and those of people that are watching. Idaho law forbids the competitive bidding process for professional services agreements. Idaho law also allows for the continuation of agreements that once were started as a phased approach. And this is certainly a phased approach. If we were to go out through a competitive request for proposal process, we would lose a lot more money than what we are looking at here, because this firm has, in fact, designed our initial small pilot and has also designed our currently operating phase 1 process. So just for your information, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to field them.
Questions? Wood?
Just a kind of reminder, Sid, we get in bed with these guys and we're with them through the whole process. But it's not necessarily them telling you what to do. Is that correct?
That is correct. What we do is we get you've seen the scope there, the number of tasks. We get a very detailed breakdown sheet of the number of hours for each engineer and each assignee in the firm. We go through that and we negotiate that with them. We don't say, oh, well, yeah, that looks good, we'll take it. No, we question each one of those. And I think Jim probably cut about $100,000 out of what was initially proposed. So, but one of the big things that we're looking at, in addition to just design services for a project, is that we need assistance because of our permit complications. We have a lot more reports that we have to submit to DEQ as part of this process. We have to furnish a detailed preliminary engineering report and cost estimate by the end of this year. So that also figures into the scope of services. The other thing that we were not sure was going to happen, we don't like it, but we're using a huge amount of additional chemical that we did not anticipate, neither us nor the engineer, just because the way the biology is working. So we've included some special testing services by the engineering firm to help us assess those chemical costs and see what we can do to reduce them. So that's all part and parcel of the same program.
So when they design things, like you just said, they designed it one way thinking it was going to come out this way, and now it's costing us more money for chemicals. How do you deal with them on things like that? Do you kind of put the finger on them? And
well, one of the things is that the biology goes where it wants to go. It's a strange thing. What we are doing right now is that we are doing such a good job with the bugs, the bacteria, in converting ammonia to nitrate. I mean, those bugs are hungry. And when they don't have ammonia, they start eating alkalinity, or the carbon-based compounds that are in the water. Calcium carbonate, the hardness. And so they're eating that so very well and doing such a fine job of it, we've got to add more chemicals to balance the pH, to drive the pH up so that we stay within permit limits. Is that going to continue in the next phase? I'm hopeful that it does not, because we are changing the process a little bit. We're going full scale from 1 million gallons a day currently to 5 million gallons a day. We're going to have more flexibility in adjusting certain biological parameters. How do we allow those bugs to grow? There's some changes we can make. But we also need some special testing to confirm that along the way as well.
okay, thanks.
Dan?
Thank you, Mayor. So Sid, is it the chemical cost, is that related to the backwashing?
No. It's related strictly to the biological activity as it relates to the pH, or the acidity and alkalinity of the solution.
The calcium?
Basically, yeah.
Okay. And you cleared up my question on going out to bid, because that was something that I emailed Jim earlier. Is this going to be a project, since this is a $20 million scope, is this something we're going to hire a project manager that Kiki had mentioned for in the future? So Jim will be the project manager.
That's his job, capital program manager. So he's going to be overseeing the consultant. One of the other things that we will be doing throughout this process of design is that there will be a series of internal and external peer reviews of the design as we go into it. This is going to be the single largest contract the city has let in one fell swoop, so we want to make sure that we don't back ourselves into some corners.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Dan asked mine. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Looking for a motion then to approve?
Well, then I will move to approve Resolution 15048, approval of professional services agreement with HDR Engineering for tertiary treatment Phase 2 improvements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please, Kathy.
Gookin,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers.
Yes.
Motion carried. We will move on now to Council Bill Number 15-1018, V-15-3, vacation of a portion of excess East Sherman Avenue right-of-way adjoining the northerly boundary of lots 1 and 2, Block A of the Boughton and Kelso Addition Plat. This is pursuant to council action on September 1st of 2015.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move for approval of Council Bill 15-1018, V-15-3, vacation of portion of access East Sherman Avenue right-of-way adjoining the northern boundary of what you said earlier.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Kathy, could you read the title, please?
An ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene vacating a portion of public right-of-way in the Boughton and Kelso Addition, recorded in Book A of Plats, page 115, records of Kootenai County, generally described as a portion of Sherman Avenue right-of-way adjoining the north side of Lot 1 and 2, Block A, lying in the southeast quarter of Section 13, Township 50 North, Range 4 West, Boise Meridian, City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing for the publication of a summary of this ordinance and effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yes.
Gookin,
Aye.
Move to suspend the rules?
Second.
Motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Evans,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yes.
Gookin.
Affirmative.
Motion carried.
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass Bill 15-1019-V, 15-5, vacation of portion of excess government way right-of-way along the western boundary of Lot 1, Block 1 of Government Way Commercial Park Plat.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? Kathy, if you could read the title again, please.
An ordinance of the City of Coeur d'Alene vacating a portion of public right-of-way in the Government Way Commercial Park Plat, recorded in Book G of Plats, page 294, records of Kootenai County, generally described as a portion of Government Way right-of-way adjoining the westerly boundary of Lot 1, Block 1, lying in the southeast quarter of Section 12, Township 50 North, Range 4 West, Boise Meridian, City of Coeur d'Alene, Kootenai County, Idaho, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith, providing a severability clause, and providing for the publication of a summary of this ordinance and effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
Adams,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yes.
Gookin,
Aye.
Evans.
Yes.
Move we suspend the rule.
Second.
Motion and a second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Adams,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Ettinger,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yep.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. We'll move on now to resolution number 15-049, agreement with the Idaho Transportation Department for transit funding. Staff report by Troy.
Good evening again. We bring forward to you tonight the funding agreement to bring forward the city's portion of CityLink. We have been doing this for a number of years. I'm pleased to announce that the dollar is the same dollar amount that we've spent for the last probably 10 years. It's an amazing program with a collaboration between Kootenai County. They help oversee it, and they do the management of it. We also have Post Falls involved in this. The Coeur d'Alene Tribe is involved with this, Hutter, Kootenai Health. It's a great collaborative effort. I would suggest to you that we spend less today than we did 20 years ago for the public transit, and we're able to move hundreds of thousands of people thanks to this collaboration. Not much. Hutter does not contribute a great deal, but it's based on our population. That was a question from our city administrator here. I would entertain any questions you might have. We have a city engineer that sits in on a number of the planning meetings. I would understand that we are working with Kootenai County to improve some of the ridership. We're always looking at better locations for the buses to pick people up at. This agreement doesn't include any of those details. This is basically the funding agreement so that we can get the federal dollars.
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It says on the agenda that it's ITD, but it's really Kootenai County, right?
It really is.
Okay. Also, this item is already budgeted and approved in the budget. Is that correct?
It is.
Very, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Troy? Woody.
Troy, can you explain why we can't charge people to ride the bus? You know, we always think, God, it would like everybody just give you $1. And we can't, right?
Well, we would jeopardize some of the funding. Right now, the county is working with a consultant, David Evans and Associates, to look at all of these different options and any ways in which to improve the system. One of the things with a cash bus would be the fact that now you have to worry about security, worried about counting the cash and all the expenses that go with it. There's also the other federal side that when we say this is a free bus program, that allows you to get more dollars and have more collaboration. So we need to weigh out for this business decision what the value is to take $1 or $2 or whatever the number is for ridership versus the free system.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll be looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve Resolution 15050. Oh, no, wait, that's the wrong one. 15049, which is an agreement with Kootenai County. Can I make that change? Kootenai County to approve transit funding.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gukin?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
No.
Motion carried. Resolution, we'll move on to Resolution 15-050, agreement with Anderson Brothers CPAs for the annual city audit. Troy.
Competition is good. The city of Coeur d'Alene has looked at 2 very fine accounting firms to do the audit for the city of Coeur d'Alene this year. The price that we have been quoted is about as equal as any quotes could be, and the decrease to the city of Coeur d'Alene that we're proposing is over 14% from last year's audit. We are proposing to bring Anderson Brothers to do our audit this year. Magnuson McHugh has done our audit for a number of years, and they've done quality work. We took this request for proposals and scored it based on a system, and both were very, very equal. So in the spirit of continuing to oversee everything that is going on in this city, your finance department is bringing forward a recommendation not based on price, based on the quality of the audit and the fact that it is a new audit firm to come in and look over everything. I would entertain any questions you might have on this proposal.
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Troy, I noticed on the first, actually Frank noticed, and I'm passing it along, on the first page that it says that the following will not be audited: management's discussion and analysis, schedule of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balances, budget actual. There's 3 other items listed. Is this different from what we had before with Magnuson McHugh?
This is more thorough. We go out and do an actuarial assignment for that police retirement trust fund and those types of things. So this particular engagement letter, because they have good knowledge of the city, wanted to include these areas as not being audited.
You have to explain to me why that's a good thing.
Because we have areas that they don't have the time built in to go do this. And they want to be thorough in bringing this engagement letter to you.
Well, so how, do these items normally get audited, or what's the accountability level on these things?
No, they don't necessarily get audited.
So you guys just do the figures then, and no one looks at them?
Well, they look at them, but they're not running all the way through to do their full analysis. I mean, we have to balance the books, and so these come into play. But they won't be in doing the research like they do, say, on our accounts payable, where they go in and randomly sample them.
And you said that Magnuson McHugh did not do these items either.
Schedule of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balances. I mean, they will look at it, but they won't fully go through the analysis that the audit would normally perform.
And Magnuson McHugh did or did not do that?
Did not.
They didn't do that either. So they're not really cutting services
No,
to get a
they're
better
being-
price?
Yeah, they're being more specific about what they would be looking at for this audit.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Troy? Okay, we'd be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would move for passage of Resolution 15050, agreement with Anderson Brothers CPAs, PA for annual city audit.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Adams,
Yes.
Ettinger.
Motion carried. We'll move on now to a public hearing. This is Council Bill number 15-1020, amendment to annual appropriation ordinance for fiscal year October 1st, 2014 through September 30th, 2015. Again, Troy has the report on this. I believe we've gone through these numbers a few times, and tonight is the night to finalize this.
This is, thank you, Mayor, council members. Again, it's very interesting that we get to wrap up our budget before the year end has occurred. So we are forecasting where we will be so that we do not go in the red on any of these line items. 2014, 2015 will go into the books, and you'll get to see an audit later now that you've approved that process that will reflect that. However, we did not get it right at the beginning of the year, and so now we need to amend for it. You have looked at these numbers 1 month ago, so we're here to entertain any questions that the public might have. So again, it's been a very good year, and we have been quite busy. So we have some increases in line items, which is very positive, and obviously we use that cash to offset the expenses. So we have talked about every one of these with you, and this has been in the packet. So we have had really good things happening. We do not anticipate GO bond dollars coming in. Those dollars are being worked on. Vehicles will be coming to you in the very near future. We've just signed the agreement to acquire the boat and all those other things, and so that inflated the budget. However, our voters approved that, which means that we have the authority to do that. Percy has been a very nice savings, as we have the firefighter retirement fund that's saving us large sums of money at this point in time. In fact, helped budget and balance our budget for the upcoming year. There's a little land acquisition that took place in there where you bought a railroad in this current fiscal year. We did not anticipate that. And we started out the year with a fire and a couple of sweepers. So again, it's amazing how 12 months can go by based on what our forecast is. But we will be able to balance this out thanks to partners like Junior Tackle Football that helped build that storage building at Person Field. That is an expense that we'll notate, and you received every nickel of that from them in the form of a donation. Other funds, again, we do like those grants. We don't budget for that. However, we do include them when we wrap this up. You have money in there for the government way that was carried over from year to year. And again, the general obligation bond expenses came in at just $55,000 for us to go out and lower that interest rate. Wastewater tied up those loaders. Sanitation fund was not quite what we anticipated it to be. And you were moving some money on Parks Capital Improvement as we did the Tubbs Hill Trail. McEwen Park carried over some dollars to get it done, as did the Four Corners project, as we did the consulting work on that. You've had a very, very busy year, and thankfully, we have had the cash to cover those expenses we did not anticipate, and your department heads have done a very good job of sticking to their budget such that we believe we'll be able to grow the fund balance by a little bit again this year. That would be my report for twice in a month.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Troy, you listed the BNSF purchase $1 million up there. I thought we were doing a loan for that. Have we paid it off?
No, sir, you did not budget for that. Thus, we are bringing forward to you all of the expenses that you did not anticipate so that we can disclose it. So we're disclosing that you spent $1.1 million for a railroad purchase that was not in your financial plan, which grows a financial plan, and then we've secured the revenue to pay that as if it was cash, which will be that interfund loan between wastewater and the general fund.
So that's all in the mechanics of everything, because it just looked like it was it's like paid for, done, but no, we're going to be paying that back.
We are going to pay that back, correct.
Cool. And the reason that the sanitation, we had to backfill that one, right?
No, sanitation ran bigger than we anticipated.
More money came in. Okay, I read it the other way.
So in our world, we have to account for every dollar of expense so that you give the authority to staff.
Yeah.
So we did not anticipate that much volume, that much business, and we have the revenue to offset that expense.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Steve?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Troy, you said you're anticipating fund balance growing by a little bit. What's a little bit?
It is very difficult to forecast that on the 15th day of September for what's going to occur by month end. So if we can grow it, it's great, and we are looking like we will be able to. So that doesn't take care of the $1.1 million, but we'll be up $50 in fund balance at least.
Kiki said $326,000. Would that be a fair number to shoot for?
That would be aggressive, but I would like to come back and share that with you. There's a couple things that are out there. Again, it's really interesting that we get to forecast year end, and it's 9/15, and our year ends in another 2 weeks. Give me 30 days after year end, and we'll get you a solid number.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
More solider.
Troy, could you just give a little bit of history on that FRF savings, on where we were a little bit ago, what it came down to, and what potentially, just looking forward a little bit, where that may go longer term?
So the Firefighter Retirement Fund was a fund set up for, obviously, firefighters that had not been properly funded while those people were in their work. So they've retired, and now the fund did not have enough money to pay out what they had committed to. Not a great scenario. Percy took that fund and kept it separate from the full Percy retirement program because it was underfunded. Anyone that had individuals that were in the older retirement, we'll call it, had to pay a premium. We had to pay more than what we're paying into Percy to make up that difference. That has now gotten up to, I hope it's about 109% of the actuarial funding for it to sustain itself into the future. There are very, very few, it's probably less than 5 people that are actually still working that are part of the FRF retirement program. So the city of Coeur d'Alene has been paying in at a premium. They've now actuarially gotten it to the point where Percy is comfortable, so they lowered this extra that we were putting into it. Probably in the next year or two, the last one will be retired, so there'll be nobody else that is in the program to go into that retirement. We are hopeful that as they do the actuarial study, probably in a month or two, that with good investments, this fund will be 110 or 112% of actuarial, and they'll be able to lower the premium to all those people, those cities that are paying into it. Fire districts are paying into it as well. So what we did, once we confirmed that they were going to lower the percentage that we had to pay in, we took that savings and you authorized police officers to be hired with those dollars. And going forward, we've now captured that savings so that we have those dollars to hire into public safety in this next fiscal year.
So Troy, we will get the news later this fall as to where they are actuarially and what's going to happen with that fund.
Correct. The state's year is a July 1, so they're finishing up their books. They'll actuarially get to look at it. We're positive that it is performing well because it's been a good investment year for that group. So we're crossing our fingers.
Okay. Any other questions for Troy? Okay, so we would be looking for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for approval of Council Bill 15-1020, amendment of the annual appropriations ordinance for fiscal year October 1, 2014 through September 30th, 2015.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Public hearing?
You know, it said public hearing here, but she normally gives me...
Actually, yeah, it doesn't say it.
She normally gives me instructions on opening and closing testimony, but since my instructions were here, and I very carefully follow all my instructions...
I will withdraw my motion, Mayor.
So if we would like to, if there's anyone here that would be wishing to give public comment at this time in the audience... So we'll open the public testimony. No one wishing to give public testimony. We will now close public testimony. So now, Woody.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move for the approval of Council Bill 15-1020, amendment of the annual appropriation ordinance.
Okay. Second. We have a motion and we have a second. Further discussion? Kathy, if you could read the title, please.
An ordinance amending Ordinance 3493, the annual appropriation ordinance for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2014, appropriating the sum of $78,203,470, which sum includes additional monies received by the City of Coeur d'Alene in the sum of $3,641,525, repealing all ordinances and parts of ordinance in conflict herewith, provide for the publication of a summary of this ordinance, and providing an effective date hereof.
Roll call, please.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Move we suspend the rule.
Second.
Motion and second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? Roll call.
McEvers?
Yes.
Gookin?
Yep.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we enter into executive session under Idaho Code 76, is that right? 76206, 74206? Okay. Under subsection J to continue to consider labor contractual matters authorized under this code.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Gookin?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Adams?
Yes.
Ettinger?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
McEvers?
Yes.
Move into executive session.